So let me tell you the story of Securrency. This story really starts out was at my 20-year reunion, I reconnected with Dan Doney, and Dan's the CEO of Securrency, and Dan and I had some classes together at the Academy, and he was the guy, if you remember the curve buster, especially when you were in the engineering classes. And you know, Dan was the guy, he sat next to me in reactor physics 2, where we typically had an average score on a test of about 30. And, you know, we had people score 0, and Dan would score 99, right? And then he would wonder why he missed the 1 point. And he wouldn't want to go back and rederive the equation to figure out why he missed it. And so Dan just kind of operated on a different level. And he went straight to MIT and got a master's in nuclear engineering after we graduated, and was off to doing greater things. But I bumped into Dan in the parking lot, 20-year reunion. You know, hadn't seen each other since graduation, traded phone numbers, and we had a couple of conversations. And then about 6 years ago, I was working on a project and called him up and said, hey, you know, need someone to help build something technologically. And Dan took this idea to places that we could have never imagined. And so, you know, he ended up bringing John Hensel in a little while later. John was his roommate at the Academy, and then the three of us were the co-founders of the company. I think we had maybe 5 other people from the class, investors, maybe some of the people who are actually on the call here today, maybe 10 or 15 classmates. And our general counsel, Jeff Truitt's class of 92+1. And one of the guys, class of 96, I was talking about Dennis, one of the guys who helped us find the investor who kind of helped save the company. Again, Naval Academy, kind of through and through. And then we have the other Marine in the group is a chief strategy officer, Patrick Campos, who was, he's not an Academy guy and such, but he was really a key guy in the whole thing. So if I would say it was built on, Dan had the technology vision for this, and without getting into what the technology is, this is if you've heard of blockchain technology, it's a technology behind Bitcoin. Probably it's becoming more and more mainstream. That Dan had a vision for using that technology to do a number of things in financial services. And when we first were getting into this in 2015, it was really like we were speaking Greek. People we would meet with, and Dan and I would walk out of a meeting, and people, you know, I'd say, those people look at us like we're crazy. And he's like, because they think we are crazy. And so, you know, and needless to say, those people didn't write any checks. And so that was the summer of 2015, kind of hoofing it around Manhattan. I think I might have gone to a Yankees game with Tom Crimmins. He's on the call here. That was much more of a highlight than having a lot of doors shut in our face. But, you know, credit to Dan, he really saw it coming. And it's, you know, Dan within this community now is regarded as one of the visionaries for it. And then we coupled that with John Hensel, another classmate, his tenacity. John is just a workhorse who stays on top of every detail. And Jeff Truitt, who I mentioned in the class of 93, he kept us out of trouble because he's the lawyer who made us make sure that we did everything right from the beginning. A lot of companies got in trouble years later because you know, if you trade securities, meaning essentially a digital version of stocks, and you don't follow the law, you know, sooner or later, a 3-letter agency comes and knocks on your door. It's not a pleasant experience. And that was something that we were always looking to avoid. So if I flash back to the beginning, kind of play by play, we, you know, I mentioned Dan and I saw each other in 2012. That was a 20-year reunion. In 2015, that's when the company was officially founded. And the name of Securrency is the combination of the 2 words, securities and currency, together. And we were sitting around on a Friday, having had a lot of doors closed in our face, happy hour in Manhattan on a Friday. And Dan was saying, oh, you know, I think, you know, these things have capabilities, securities and currencies, and, you know, and we're talking, and we were like, oh, put the 2 words together, Securrency. And so I immediately pull out my phone, I get on GoDaddy and see if I can buy the domain before, you know, anyone's overhearing us or something like this. And somebody had it. We ended up buying it like the next month for a few $1,000s, I think. But you think of this, that going back to Schwartzman's criteria, is it big? Is it unique? And is the timing right? Well, it certainly was big. It was unique because we weren't aware of anyone else who was doing. timing wise, we might have been a little bit early. So we headed into 2016. We started doing some patents, which I had never done any patents before, but we were convinced if we didn't, that we would get overrun by one of the big financial institutions. And so we spent a lot of time on that. I think January of 2016, that's when John Hensel was still in the Navy at the time. And we were all on conference calls working through the minutia of patents. And I mean, it made me feel like being a lawyer and such, but we did it. And at that time, Dan was the only person writing any software. He was programming it. We later had 70 or 80 people working on the software. And I was actually selling hurricane protection at the time because we didn't have any money to make any money, to pay us any money, I should say. And so I was working selling hurricane protection to hedge fund billionaires in Palm Beach to feed my kids, because I was a single parent at the time. So we did that. 2017, we got some money, I think, from some friends and family, classmates, some things like that. Dan had moved over to another 3-letter agency. And it was always funny because at the time when we do conference calls, Dan was always in a different room. And we'd say, oh, so where are you today, Dan? When you get on a Zoom call, like, hey, where are you? Oh, what's going on? And Dan was always in a different room. And Dan would go, I'm in a building in Washington, D.C. And he could never really say which building he was necessarily in. But eventually we got Dan full time, but he was still working for the government back then. John retired from the Navy, picked up his family on his own dime and moved them to Dubai. And I remember being at his retirement in Annapolis, and John says, oh, I got an idea. I'm thinking about moving my family to Dubai. And I was like, John, are you crazy? Like, I have no idea when we're going to have any money to pay you. Like, what are you talking about? That sounds expensive to me. But, it turned out to be one of the greatest things. John, willing to take a big risk and dig into his own pocket to do that. 2018, we had raised some money. We had a bunch of people on board. Things were starting, Dan wasn't having to cut all of his own code. And then come 2019, by the beginning of 2019, we'd run out of money. And we had about 80 employees and no money. And a couple of months before this, the management had stopped paying ourselves. And then slowly we went through levels of not paying. And 2019, I got to tell you, hardest year of my life by far, much worse than plebe year or any other 1 year period of time, because it was when you first of all, you're not getting paid. You don't know if you're going to get paid or when you're going to get paid. And it was a tough year for everyone. And it was, you just never know if it's going to end. All we knew, I don't think there was ever any hint of any of us quitting, but I do remember one time talking with John Hensel in about the middle of the year and saying, we got to find a way out of this, or you and I can never go to a class reunion again, right? Because, we show up and we lost all these people's money, and, it's going to be acrimonious, to say the least. And he said, yep, we got to find a way out of this thing. And so eventually we did. And it was literally on December 31st of 2019, we all got paid for the entire year on one day and such. And so it all ended up working out. But I got to tell you, it could have easily gone the other way. It's, as easily as if the wind had been blowing the other direction, it could have gone either way. So the story has kind of, I wouldn't say ended well. It's still, the story's still going, but it's come around. It's been good, but it was pretty rough. And it's, when you've taken money from your friends and family, and I'll tell you, as much as I like to stay in touch with people, whenever you're afraid you lost their money, you don't necessarily go out of your way to stay in touch during that particular period of time, because they may ask you what's going on and you want to go, you don't want to lie about it or anything, but you don't want to just it's easier to not have the conversation. So, some of the people knew we were in a tough time, but it was, what I found is people during that period, we came into the team that we had pretty much fell into 5 categories. And number one, I would call the heroes. That would be John Hensel and his wife, Jeannie. They really dug into their pockets during this, and they won't tell you this. And this might be the first time we've ever really talked about it, anyone outside. But they just kept slamming their Amex down on the table over and over again, because we had business expenses. We had to pay Microsoft for our cloud services and things like this, that if you don't pay them, they shut it off. And so then all of a sudden we have 50 or 60 programmers who can't work anymore because the cloud's been shut off. And so they dug deep. So first of all, he wasn't getting paid. Second of all, he's digging into his pocket to pay company expenses. And third, at a time when it looks like the whole thing might end up in an airplane crash. And so, you know, hats off to John and Jeannie Hensel, because they really stepped up. The second category, I'd say people were the team players, you know, people who show up and they actually work harder. And they say, hey, I understand I'm not getting paid. I understand that we're in a bad situation, but we've got to fix this. And kind of going what I was saying, that conversation I had with John Hensel. And that's probably that's the majority of the people we had on the management team. Third, there's regular folks who are like, it looks like this thing might not work out. And they kind of pull back a little bit and they're not working as hard. And this is particularly hard when everyone's working remotely, which we were working remotely before the pandemic came along. And so you just never know, like, what are people doing? You got a smart person's probably out looking for a job, you know, just in case, and that kind of thing. The fourth category I would call the parasites. And it's the people who actually stopped working, but they're not going to tell you, and they're hoping that eventually you'll pay them, even though they're not doing anything anymore. And then the fifth category was just people who actually take action against you. Believe it or not. And so whenever you're already in a bad situation, you have people who actually turn on you, and it's, you know, it's disappointing, but, you know, it happens. And, you know, we had classmates who were in all those categories, believe it or not. And so it was, you know, whatever military metaphor you want to use for characters revealed under fire or some kind of thing like this, but people really showed themselves, and it was, you know, it was disappointing. It was a tough period of time to go through, but anyway, here we are right now. So we go from that tough period where 2019, I would say Securrency was at risk of being sold for pennies, selling some of the intellectual property, liquidating, and all of us standing by waiting to get sued. And we just closed a round of funding here a month or so ago. This is what's called the Series B, which is the second big funding round. The company raised $30 million. Now it's a total of $63.5 million, I think. And that's, I mean, look, that's a lot of money to me. It is a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money, but whenever you're talking about building systems for changing the financial services market, you can go through that money pretty quickly.